Have you ever imagined being forced to scrub a ballroom floor with your bare hands while nobles laughed at your humiliation? Amelie lived that nightmare. But what she didn't know was that the Alpha King was watching every second through the window, and that moment would change both their destinies forever. Because when their eyes finally met, something impossible awakened, something forbidden, something that not even his fiancée could prevent. Stay until the end, because what begins as humiliation turns into a connection so powerful it can destroy a kingdom or save it. The wine was red, deep as blood, thick as an unfulfilled promise. Amelie saw the liquid drip down Lady Isolde Varen's ivory silk gown before she could even process what had happened. The silver tray trembled in her hands. No, it was no longer in her hands. It was on the floor. The sound echoed through the Hall of Fallen Stars like a bell announcing execution. Silence. Amelie knew this kind of silence. It was the silence that came before pain, the kind that made the air feel heavy, dense, almost solid against her skin. She kept her eyes lowered, fixed on the pools of wine spreading across the black marble. Each drop felt like an accusation. Excellent, he thought, his inner voice sharp as ever. 6 years of serving in this castle without a single mistake, and now I decide to spill wine on the king's bride? Maybe next time I'll trip and set the throne room on fire. Why not? You... Lady Isolde's voice was sharp, piercing. Amelie didn't need to look to know her face was flushed with fury. She could feel the anger like physical heat, invisible waves searing the air between them. This was the curse of being what she was, Omega, silent listener. Every intense emotion of a nearby alpha echoed within her like a scream in an empty cave. And Lady Isolde, even though she was a woman, had alpha blood running through her veins. "Forgive me, my lady." The words came out automatically, rehearsed. Amelie had learned long ago that a quick apology sometimes softened the blows. Sometimes. "It was an accident. Accident?" Isolde took a step forward. Her heels clicked against the marble. Click, click, click. Each sound a countdown. "You spilled wine on me on the night of my official engagement." Amelie finally looked up. Wrong. Isolde was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Blonde hair like molten gold, green eyes like polished emeralds, flawless skin. But there was something cold about her beauty, something that reminded her of statues in cemeteries. Beautiful, but dead. "Ma'am, I can clean..." "You'll clean it." Isolde smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but not the dress. Amelie felt her stomach sink. Isolde turned to the crowd of nobles watching the scene with morbid interest. Men and women in luxurious attire, crystal glasses in their hands, thin smiles on their lips. Amelie knew those smiles. They were the smiles of those about to revel in another's misfortune. "Does anyone have a cloth?" Isolde asked, her voice as sweet as poisoned honey. "No? What a shame." She looked back at Amelie. "Then you'll have to use your hands." It took a moment for the words to sink in. When they did, Amelie felt her blood run cold. "My lady, on your knees, now." There was no choice. Amelie knew this. She had witnessed worse punishments for lesser offenses. In Twilight Valley, hierarchy was absolute law. Alphas at the top, betas in the middle, omegas at the bottom. And omegas from the court of the nameless? They were less than bottom. They were forgettable, disposable. She knelt down. The marble was cold, even through the thin fabric of her uniform. Amelie pressed her palms against the floor, feeling the sticky liquid cling to her skin. The wine had a strong, sweet scent, cloying. She began rubbing, slow, circular motions, trying to absorb the liquid with her bare hands. Laughter. Quiet at first, Then louder. Someone said something Emily couldn't quite hear. More laughter. She kept her head down, her dark brown hair falling like a curtain around her face. At least it hid her somewhat. Scrubbing marble with your own hands, he thought, the irony bitter. What an innovative punishment. Next time, maybe they'll make me wash the moon. Why not? Faster. Isolde's voice cut through the laughter. And don't forget where the wine spilled. There, and oh, right near my feet. Be careful not to touch my shoe. It would be a shame to have to ask you to clean it with your tongue. More laughter. Emily rubbed faster. Her fingers were beginning to burn. The wine was acidic, irritating her skin. She could feel the eyes boring into her. Dozens of eyes. Hundreds, maybe. The Hall of Fallen Stars was packed for the engagement celebration. Everyone was watching. Everyone was judging. Don't cry, she ordered herself. Don't give them the satisfaction. That's when he felt it. A pressure. Not physical, something deeper, like someone had pressed a finger against an old wound. Emily froze for a split second, instinct screaming. There was an alpha nearby, close, and this alpha was watching. Not with amusement, not with contempt, with something that looked like fury? She didn't dare lift her head, but her senses flared, that damned ability she could never completely shut off. She tried to locate the source. There, above. Emily risked a quick glance, just a second, her eyes sliding over the crowd to the upper balcony that surrounded the ballroom. There was a figure in the shadows, behind the stained glass window that overlooked the inner gardens. Tall, motionless, watching. The Alpha King. Emily dropped her eyes so quickly that her vision went dark for a moment. Her heart raced. No, he thought. No. Anyone but him. Dorian Ashmar, the Alpha King of Twilight Valley. Emily had only seen him from afar in 6 years. He didn't often frequent the service areas. He didn't interact with servants unless absolutely necessary. There were rumors, of course. There were always rumors. They said he was cold as ice, fair but ruthless. They said he didn't smile. They said he was cursed. And now he was watching her scrub the floor like an animal. The humiliation burned deeper. Emily rubbed harder, ignoring the pain in her fingers, the tingling in her knees. She wanted it to end. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here. I think it's clean enough, Isolde finally said, bored. For now. Emily didn't move. She waited. Only when she heard Isolde's footsteps retreating, the rustle of silk and the conversations resuming, did she dare to breathe properly. Slowly, very slowly, she began to stand. Her legs were shaking, her knees ached, her hands were stained red, sticky, useless. She wiped them on the side of her uniform, it was ruined anyway, and forced herself to walk, not run, walk, head down, steady steps. She had almost reached the back door when she heard it. You. The voice was deep, controlled, and it came from above. Emily stopped. Pretend you didn't hear, the inner voice whispered desperately. Keep walking, get out, disappear. Look at me. There was no pretending now. Slowly, so slowly it felt like a puppet on rusty strings, Emily turned. She looked up. Dorian Ashmar stood on the balcony, no longer in shadow. The light from the chandeliers partially illuminated him. Hair as black as a raven's wing, eyes as golden as a full moon, an expression so blank it seemed carved from stone. He wore dark clothes, simple as a king. No crown, no jewelry, just the unmistakable aura of power that made the air vibrate around him. He watched her. Emily held his gaze out of pure survival instinct. To lower her eyes now would be to admit fear, and she was tired of admitting fear. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something pass through those golden eyes. Something that wasn't indifference. But it was so quick she could have imagined it. "Who ordered this?" Dorian asked, not to her, to the hall. Silence again. But this was different. This was the silence of fear. No one answered. Dorian descended the stairs. Each footstep echoed. He moved like a predator, fluid, economical, lethal. Amelie felt his presence like a physical weight as he approached, the brute strength of a true alpha. Her body screamed for retreat. She didn't. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at her stained hands, at her dirty knees, at her face, which she knew was red with suppressed humiliation. "Who ordered it?" he repeated, quieter now, more dangerous. Amelie began, but her voice was hoarse. She cleared her throat. "I spilled wine on Lady Isolde, Your Majesty. It was my mistake." "I didn't ask what you did. I asked who ordered you to scrub the floor like that." Why does he care? The thought came quickly, confused. Why would a king care about a servant? Before he could respond, Isolde appeared beside them. Her dress had been changed. She was now wearing something emerald green. She smiled at Dorian, lightly touching his arm. "My love, it was just a lesson. The girl was clumsy. You made her crawl like an animal." Dorian didn't take his eyes off Amelie. "During our engagement. She ruined my dress. And I can buy 1,000 dresses." Finally, he looked at Isolde. The coldness in his gaze made even Amelie feel cold. Isolde paled. Amelie realized she was holding her breath. Dorian turned to her. He studied her face for a long moment. Then something impossible happened. He reached out, not to touch, just offering. "Get up." Amelie blinked. This is a trap, he thought. It has to be. But she took his hand. The touch was brief, formal, but the moment their skin met, Amelie felt something shoot down her spine like lightning. Not pain, not exactly. It was as if every nerve ending had awakened simultaneously. She saw his eyes widen a fraction, so small that anyone would have missed it. He felt it too. Dorian released her quickly. He took a step back. "Which ward do you serve in?" he asked, his voice back to that controlled tone. "West Wing, Your Majesty. Kitchens." "No longer." He turned and addressed the silent crowd. "Starting tomorrow, she will serve directly in the royal chambers as a personal maid." The hall exploded in whispers. Amelie felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Personal maid? Of the king? That didn't make sense. That was... "Dorian!" Isolde protested, her composure finally breaking. "You can't!" "I can, and I can dismiss everyone here if you prefer to question my decisions." He looked around, the challenge clear. No one dared speak. Then his eyes returned to Amelie. "Report at 7 in the morning. Ask for Gareth. He will brief you." Amelie opened her mouth, closed it. There were no words, only confusion and a growing terror. Being a personal servant meant proximity. It meant visibility. It meant she could no longer be invisible. And worse, much worse, meant being close share. Dorian turned and started up the stairs again. Amelie watched him go, still processing, still trying to understand if this had been a salvation or a damnation. Just before he disappeared into the upper hallway, he stopped. He didn't turn, but his voice reached her, low enough that only Amelie heard. "No one crawls in my kingdom, not anymore." Then he was gone. Amelie stood there, alone in the center of the hall, as the nobles slowly returned to the feast. The whispers continued. She could feel the stares, the speculation, the envy, the venom. And in the shadows, hidden from the crowd, Tilda, The old maid, who had cared for Emily since she arrived at the castle, watched with a small smile on her wrinkled lips. Interesting, Tilda thought. Very interesting. The door to the royal chambers was made of black oak, so dark it seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Emily stood before it at 7 in the morning, as ordered, her hands still sore from the night before and her stomach churning with nervousness. "Breathe," she ordered herself. "It's just a job. You've served alphas before. But not this alpha. Not the king. Not the man whose touch had left her skin tingling for hours." Before she could knock, the door opened. A tall man appeared, mid-30s, with tousled light brown hair, his guard uniform wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. His blue eyes studied her with a mixture of curiosity and something that felt like pity. "You must be Amelie," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Gareth, head guard. Come in." Emily entered, her steps hesitant. The royal chambers were both exactly what she expected and not at all what she expected. Vast, yes, high ceilings with dark wood beams, enormous windows overlooking the gardens still shrouded in morning mist, but surprisingly empty. Little furniture, no personal decorations. It felt more like a fortress than a home. "He's not here right now." Gareth closed the door and locked it. "Meeting with the council. He should be back in an hour. That gives me time to explain his duties." Emily nodded, trying to ignore the relief that she wouldn't have to face Dorian right away. Gareth walked to a table near the unlit fireplace. He picked up a rolled-up parchment, but didn't open it. He just held it, his fingers drumming nervously against the paper. "Look," he began, then sighed. "I have to be honest with you. I don't know why he did it." "What?" "Bringing you here." Gareth stared at her, discomfort clear on his face. The king has never had a personal maid, never wanted one. He prefers distance from everyone. "So why me?" The question burned on Emily's tongue, but she didn't ask it aloud. It wasn't her place to question. "Your duties are simple." Gareth unrolled the parchment, but Emily noticed he wasn't actually reading it. He was improvising. "Change the sheets, organize the rooms, draw baths, serve meals when he eats here, which isn't often, avoid disturbing him, and," he hesitated, "if he has an episode, leave immediately. Don't try to help, just come out and find me." Emily frowned. "Episode?" Gareth looked away. "You'll hear rumors anyway. The king, he has nightmares. Sometimes he wakes up violent. It's not his fault, but it's dangerous to be around when it happens." Nightmares, Emily thought. But from the way Gareth avoided her eyes, she suspected it was much more. Much more. "I understand," he said simply. "Well," Gareth rolled up the parchment again, clearly relieved to be done with the matter. "Start with the sheets. The bedroom is through that door." He pointed to a partially open door to the left. "I'll be outside if you need anything." He left, and Emily was left alone. The stillness of the rooms was oppressive. She could hear her own breathing, the rustle of her uniform as she moved. She forced herself to walk to the bedroom. It was even more Spartan than the main room. A huge bed with dark sheets, completely disheveled, blankets on the floor, pillows crumpled, as if someone had been wrestling with them all night. A simple dresser, an overturned chair near the window. And on the walls, scratches, deep marks in the wood, as if claws had ripped the surface. Emily stopped. She looked at those marks. "It's not his fault," Gareth had said. She approached slowly, ran her fingers over one of the scratches. They were deep, very deep, made with brutal force. "Admiring the decor?" Emily spun around so fast she stumbled. Dorian stood in the bedroom doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. He wore formal clothes, a black tunic with silver embroidery, dark trousers, and high boots. His hair was tied back in a loose half ponytail. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, his jaw set, his shoulders rigid as if carrying an invisible weight. "Your Majesty." Amelie curtsied quickly, her heart racing. "I didn't hear him come in." "Clearly." He entered the room, walked past her without looking, and went straight to the window. He opened it. Cold morning air filled the space. He took a deep breath, as if he were dying of thirst and the air was water. "Did Gareth explain his duties?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then why are you still standing there?" Amelie blinked. "I was about to begin." "Then begin." She moved quickly, grateful for something to do with her hands. She began pulling back the sheets, trying to ignore his presence burning behind her. It was like being near a bonfire. She didn't need to look to know exactly where he was. She could feel him. That constant pressure all alphas emanated, but magnified, intense. And beneath that, something else. Something that made her skin tingle, her breath quicken. "Concentrate," she scolded herself. "Just do your job." But then she caught it. A wave of emotion so strong it nearly made her stagger. Pain, deep, chronic, like a wound that never quite healed. It came from him. Amelie closed her eyes for a second, took a deep breath. She tried to block it out, but her ability never worked that way. She couldn't just shut it off. It was like trying not to hear a scream. "You're shaking." Her eyes opened. Dorian had turned, watching her with that blank expression she was beginning to recognize. It wasn't coldness, she realized. It was control. He forced himself to look blank. "I'm cold, Your Majesty." The lie came out softly. "The window," he said, then seemed to realize. He walked over and closed it. "Better?" "Yes, thank you." Silence fell between them. Amelie went back to work, removing the sheets, folding them. She could feel his eyes on her, studying, assessing. "Why didn't you run away?" The question took her by surprise. Amelie looked at him. "Your Majesty?" "Last night, when Isolde humiliated you." Dorian tilted his head slightly, like a predator analyzing its prey. "You could have fled the hall, but you didn't. Why?" Amelie considered lying, but something in those golden eyes stopped her. Because running away would make things worse. It always does. "Own experience?" "6 years of experience living here." He didn't answer immediately. He just watched her, and Amelie had the unsettling feeling that he saw more than he should, as if he could read the words she wasn't saying. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "I do." Honesty again. Amelie didn't know why she was being honest, but the words kept coming. "Everyone does." "Including you?" "Especially me." Something passed over his face. Surprise, perhaps? Or just weariness. "At least you're honest. Most people lie. They say they respect me, admire me, that I'm fair and wise." He walked to the messy bed, running his hand over the sheets Amelie hadn't yet removed. "They lie very well." "And you prefer the truth." "I prefer to know where people really are." He stared at her. "So, where are you, Amelie?" She held her breath. No one had asked her name. No one ever asked servants' names. But he knew. Of course he knew. He had summoned her. "I'm trying to survive, Your Majesty," she said softly, "as I always have been." Dorian nodded slowly, as if that made sense, as if it were an answer he'd been waiting for. "Then survive here. And maybe," he paused, seemed to reconsider, "just survive." He left the room. Amelie stood there, clutching dirty sheets, trying to understand what had just happened. The following days established a strange rhythm. Amelie arrived at 7. She cleaned, organized, prepared. Dorian was rarely there during the day, always in meetings, always with the council, always carrying that invisible weight on his shoulders. But at night, he returned. And the nights were when everything fell apart. The first time Amelie heard it, she was in the outer hallway, about to leave. A scream, muffled but unmistakable. It came from the living quarters. She froze, her hand on the doorknob. "Skirt," Gareth's voice echoed in his memory. "If he has an episode, leave immediately." But his feet didn't move. Another scream, then the sound of something breaking. Amelie turned the doorknob and entered. The main room was dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the windows. Gareth wasn't there. He must have been on patrol. And from the bedroom came that sound. Heavy breathing, gasping, like someone drowning. She walked to the door and pushed it open slowly. Dorian was in bed, but not asleep. He was sitting up, hunched forward, his hands clutching his hair. He was trembling. His whole body was shaking violently, as if he were having convulsions. And pain. The sound emanating from him was so intense that Amelie staggered and had to lean against the doorframe. "Your Majesty," she whispered. He didn't answer. Maybe he hadn't even heard her. He pulled harder on her hair, a low, guttural sound escaping his throat. It wasn't human. It was somewhere between a growl and a moan. Fury, Amelie realized with growing horror. He is on the verge of fury. She didn't think. She just acted. She walked to the bed, slowly, each step measured. Her ability was wide open now, absorbing everything, the pain, the anger, the despair. It was like being submerged in ice water. It burned, but she kept going. "Dorian, your name." She used your name, not your title. "Look at me." He lifted his head. His eyes were too golden, bright, not human. Wolf. He was losing control. Amelie knelt beside the bed, bringing herself to eye level with him. Slowly, very slowly, she reached out. Not to touch, just offering. "You're not alone," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You're not alone now." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, trembling, he placed his hand in hers. The contact was like lightning again, but this time, Amelie was prepared. She let her skill flow, let it work. She felt his pain as her own. She felt the rage as something alive, pulsing, trying to consume. And she pushed back, gently, firmly, like calming a frightened animal. "Breathe," she projected, not knowing if he could feel it. "Just breathe." Dorian breathed, once, twice, 3 times. The tremors gradually subsided. His eyes lost their unnatural glow, returning to their normal gold. Still intense, but human. He stared at her, confusion and something that looked like fear on his face. "What did you do?" Amelie released his hand, stepped back. "Nothing, Your Majesty. You just breathed." "No." He got up from the bed, so fast she almost fell backward. "Don't lie. I felt it. You did something. What did you do?" And panic rose in Amelie's throat. He knows. Somehow he knows. "I am not. Tell the truth." "Silent Omega!" The words burst from her. "I am Silent Omega. I can sense alphas. I can calm them, sometimes." She stared at him, defiant now. "Are you satisfied? Are you going to sell me out now? That's what everyone does when they find out." Dorian stood still, just staring at her, processing. "So, impossible," he laughed. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was something bitter, broken. He ran his hand over his face, through his hair, and when he looked at her again, there was something that resembled despair. "That's why," he muttered, mostly to himself. "That's why I—" He stopped. He shook his head. Of course it is. Your Majesty." "Skirt." Amelie blinked. "What?" "Get out. Now, before I do something we'll both regret. She didn't argue. She stood up and back to the door. But before leaving, she couldn't resist. "You're not going to sell me?" Dorian didn't look at her. He just stood there, his back turned, his shoulders tense. "No." "Why?" "Because I'm not my father," he said, his voice low, weary. "Now get out, and don't come back. Consider yourself dismissed." Amelie hesitated. Then she nodded, even though she knew he couldn't see. She left. She closed the door behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, her legs shaking, her heart still racing. Exempted, she thought. I was fired. He should have felt relief, but all he felt was emptiness. The next morning, Amelie didn't go to the royal chambers. She returned to the kitchens and resumed her former duties. No one asked any questions. Tilda just looked at her with those shrewd eyes and said nothing. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, Gareth appeared in the kitchens. "You need to go back," he said bluntly. Amelie looked at him in surprise. "The king dismissed me, and now he's summoning you back. Why?" Gareth hesitated. Then, more quietly, "Because he's had 3 episodes in the last 3 days, each one worse than the last. And yesterday," he looked away, "yesterday he almost killed me. Not because he meant to, but because he couldn't stop." Amelie's stomach sank. "Gareth, whatever you did that night, it worked." He looked at her, pleading in his eyes. "So please, come back. Not for him, for all of us." And how could she refuse? When Amelie entered the royal chambers that night, Dorian was at the window. The same position as before, but this time, when she appeared, he didn't turn around. "You're back," was all he said. "I was summoned. I could have refused." "No, I couldn't." Silence. Then, so quietly, she almost didn't hear. "Thank you." Amelie didn't answer. She just got to work. She changed the sheets, she organized, she prepared. And when night fell and she heard the first sighing, that ragged breathing, that trembling beginning, she didn't wait for orders. He entered the room. He knelt beside the bed. He held out his hand. And Dorian, without a word, took it. This became their ritual. Every night, without fail. And slowly, so slowly that neither of them noticed at first, something changed. It wasn't just necessity. It wasn't just survival. It was something deeper, more dangerous. It was connection. 2 weeks. Amelie had 2 weeks of fragile peace before everything fell apart. She should have known it wouldn't last. Peace never lasts. Not for people like her. The news came on a foggy morning. Amelie was changing the sheets that were no longer torn apart every night, no longer stained with cold sweat, the ones she could fold without feeling the knot in her stomach, when Gareth entered the room with a familiar expression. "Problem." "Lady Isolde arrives today," he said, straight to the point. He never beat around the bush. It was one of the things Amelie appreciated about him. "At noon, with the entire retinue. She'll be staying in the East Wing, but—" He hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "She'll want to spend time here, with him." Of course. She was the bride. She had every right. So why did Amelie's chest tighten as if someone had stuck a blade between her ribs? "I see," she said, keeping her voice neutral. She folded the sheet tighter than necessary. "Should I leave while she's here?" "I don't know." Gareth watched her with that expression he'd become so familiar with lately. Concern. As if she were something fragile that might break. It would probably be safer. Safer? For whom? Amelie didn't ask. She just nodded and continued working. Dorian entered half an hour later. He had a meeting with the council, and he was wearing formal clothes, a dark green tunic with the family crest embroidered in silver, a thick chain around his neck. He looked more like a king than ever. less like him. He stopped when he saw her. He'd been doing that lately. He'd stop, as if he needed to make sure she was really there. "Emily, Your Majesty," she curtsied appropriately. Even after 2 weeks, even after nights holding his hand while he fought invisible demons, she still maintained formalities during the day. It was safer this way. Clear lines, no fuss. "Isolde arrives today," Gareth informed me. Silence. Dorian walked to the window, always the window, and looked out. Mist covered the gardens like a shroud. "Things will change," he said, without looking at her. "She will be present, more than before. It's natural. She's your fiancé." Yes, the word came out heavy. She is. Emily waited for more, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring into space, and she could feel that damned ability, always feeling, the tension coiled around him like a rope about to snap. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "did you sleep last night?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "A few hours." Lie. She knew. She'd come to check in the early hours of the morning, as she always does now, and had found him in the living room, sitting in the dark, just existing. He hadn't seen her. She hadn't come in. She'd just watched for a moment before returning to her own quarters downstairs. "You should rest before she arrives." Emily folded the last sheet and put it in the basket. "I can have tea brought, the kind Tilda makes. It helps." "What's in that tea?" Dorian finally turned, one eyebrow raised. Almost a smile. Almost. "Herbs," Emily said innocently. "Just herbs. Herbs that drug me. Herbs that do irrest. There is a difference." This time he actually smiled. Small, fleeting, but real. Emily felt something warm spread across her chest and immediately pushed him down. No, not that. It couldn't be that. "Bring the tea," Dorian said, still with that almost smile. "But don't tell anyone that the Alpha King of Twilight Valley is poisoned by his own servant." "Your secret is safe with me, Your Majesty." She left to get the tea, and didn't see the way he watched her go, didn't see the expression that crossed his face, something between regret and longing. Didn't see him close his eyes and murmur something so low not even the wind could hear. "It's done." Isolde arrived at noon sharp, as promised. Emily watched from the kitchen window, far away, safe, invisible, as the entourage entered the main gates. 5 carriages, 24 guards. Trunks and trunks of luggage. And at the center of it all, Isolde, beautiful as ever, wearing a blood-red dress that contrasted with her golden hair. She waved to the crowd that had gathered to see her. She smiled. Perfect. Pretty, isn't she? Tilda's voice came from beside Emily. The older woman had appeared silently, as she always did. She was chewing on something, probably those gingerbread cookies she hid in her pockets. Poison, usually. Emily looked at her. Tilda was short, round, with gray hair tied back in a loose bun and eyes that saw more than they should. She had been the only person kind to Emily when she arrived at the castle 6 years ago, the only one who had treated her like a human. "You don't like her." It wasn't a question. "I don't trust her," Tilda corrected, offering Emily a biscuit. "There's a difference. That girl has ambition in her eyes, and ambition in a beautiful woman is dangerous. She's going to marry the king. It's natural to have ambition. Greed for power, yes. Greed for the man?" Tilda shook her head. "She doesn't want the man. She wants the throne." Emily didn't answer. She just watched as Dorian descended the main stairs to greet Isolde. Even from a distance, she could see the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he kept his distance, even when Isolde reached out and touched his arm. Isolde leaned in, whispered something. Dorian nodded. Formal, polite, empty. "See?" Tilda murmured. "No spark, no heat. It's like watching 2 statues pretending to be human. Maybe he's just reserved." Reserved, Tilda snorted. Honey, I've known this man since I was a child. I've seen him reserved. I've seen him cold. I've seen him angry. But in the last few weeks, she looked at Emily meaningfully, in the last few weeks, I've seen him different. Less gray. Less dead. Emily felt her face heat up. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course not. Tilda patted her arm. But be careful, girl. Hearts are fragile things, especially those that have been frozen for too long. When they thaw, they break easily. She left, leaving Emily alone with those words and a growing knot in her stomach. Emily avoided the royal chambers for the rest of the day. She hadn't been summoned, so she assumed she wasn't needed. Isolde would be there, occupying the space Emily had begun to think of as... No, it wasn't her space. It never would be. But when night fell and she was almost asleep in her little room on the servants' floor, there was a knock at the door. Gareth. He's asking for you, was all he said. Emily's heart raced. Are you having an episode? No, not yet, but there will be. I can see the signs. Gareth looked tired, worried. Lady Isolde dined with him. I don't know what was said, but when she left, he shook his head. Just go, please. Emily went. The rooms were dark when she arrived, only one candle lit in the main room, shadows dancing on the walls. Dorian sat in a chair near the unlit fireplace, holding a glass of wine that appeared untouched. Your Majesty, she said softly. He didn't turn around. I thought you wouldn't come. She was summoned. What if it hadn't been? Would you have come anyway? The question caught her off guard. Emily hesitated. Honesty or safety? Honesty was always dangerous. But with him? Yes, she admitted, I would have come. Dorian finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, so tired, as if he'd lived 1,000 lives and none of them had been kind. Why? Because the words trailed off. Because what? Because she cared? Because he needed her? Because in the last 2 weeks she'd started feeling something she shouldn't? Because it's my job, Your Majesty. Something passed over his face. Disappointment? Pain? It happened so quickly she couldn't be sure. Of course. He looked back at the empty fireplace. Your job. A heavy silence fell between them. Emily didn't know what to do. Stay? Go? Ask what had happened? Dorian made the decision for her. Isolde reminded me today why this marriage is necessary. The Varenth family controls the northern mountains. Without the alliance, there would be war. Thousands would die. He swirled his glass, the wine making small waves. She also reminded me how lucky I am, that she is beautiful, intelligent, perfect for a queen. Each word was like a stone in Emily's stomach. She's right, he continued, about everything. It's a good marriage, strategic, beneficial. Pause. Empty. Your Majesty, Dorian finally looked at her again. When I'm near her, you feel what I feel. Emily didn't want to answer, but he deserved honesty. He always deserved honesty. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then you know. He set the glass aside and stood. He walked toward her, and Emily had to force herself not to flinch. Not out of fear, out of something worse. You know that when she touches me, it's like touching ice. You know that when she speaks, I hear only calculations. You know that when she smiles... His voice dropped. It's not for me. It's for the crown. Emily stared at him. And what do you feel when I touch you? The question was out before he could stop it. Bold, inappropriate, dangerous. Dorian stood still. Then, slowly, he raised his hand. He didn't touch her. He just held his palm inches from her cheek, so close that Emily could feel the heat. Fire, he murmured. I feel fire. The air between them grew heavy, charged, like before a storm. Emily knew she should retreat. She knew crossing that line would be disastrous. for both of them. But she leaned in, just a millimeter, enough for her cheek to touch his palm. The contact was electric. Dorian closed his eyes, a look of pure pain crossing his face. His fingers curled lightly against her skin, delicate, reverent. Amelie. Her name came out like a prayer, like a curse. "What are you doing to me? What are you doing with me?" she replied, her voice broken. They remained like that, frozen in a moment they couldn't have, they shouldn't have. A stolen moment. Impossible. Then, the door opened. Isolde. Amelie backed away so quickly she nearly stumbled. Dorian dropped his hand, his expression returning to that empty mask. But it was too late. Isolde had seen it. From the sharp green eyes, from the way his lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, she had seen it all. "Ah," Isolde said, sweet as rotten sugar. "Sorry to interrupt. I forgot my stole here earlier." She entered, grabbed something from a chair. She moved with the grace of a predator. She looked at Amelie. "You must be the new maid, the one who caused that scene at the ball." "Yes, my lady." Amelie lowered her eyes. Submission. It was safer. "Interesting," Isolde approached, slowly, circling. "Very interesting. Tell me, do you have any special talent? Something that makes you indispensable?" It was a trap. Amelie could feel it. "I just serve, my lady." Isolde stopped right in front of her, so close that Amelie had to lift her chin to look at her. "You know, I know your type. Silent Omega. Useful, dangerous." Amelie's blood froze. "Isolde!" Dorian's was cut sharply. "Enough." "Enough?" Isolde turned to him, eyebrow raised. "My love, I'm just getting to know your people. After all, I'm going to be queen. I need to know who serves in my chambers." "My quarters," Dorian corrected coldly. "And she's my responsibility, not yours." Something passed between them, a silent tug of war. Finally, Isolde stepped back. "As you wish." She walked to the door, paused in the doorway. She glanced at Amelie over her shoulder. "But be careful, dear. Alphas can be volatile, especially those with issues." She let the word hang in the air. "It would be a shame if something happened to you." Then she left. The silence that remained was deafening. "She knows," Amelie whispered, panic finally catching up with her. "She knows what I am." Yes, Dorian didn't try to lie. And now that he knows, he's going to use it. Against me? Against both of us. Us. The word echoed. Dangerous. Hopeful. Impossible. Amelie looked at him. "What are we going to do?" Dorian stared at her for a long moment. Then, in a move that completely surprised her, he closed the distance between them. He cupped her face in his hands. Gently. Firmly. "Let's be careful," he said, looking straight into her eyes. "And we'll survive. Together." "Together," Amelie repeated, savoring the word. "Together," Dorian confirmed. And in that moment, with his hands on her face, his golden eyes burning with something that wasn't just need, Amelie knew. She was completely lost. The next 3 days were a careful dance of avoidance and need. Isolde was everywhere, in the corridors, in the gardens, in the throne room during audiences, and always in the royal apartments at dusk, as if she had a right to that space. Technically, she did. She was the bride. But every time Amelie saw her exit through the front door, something inside her writhed like a wounded animal. Jealousy. She knew the name of that poison. She had seen it consume other people. She never thought it would consume her, too. The nights were worse. Dorian no longer summoned her, not directly. But Amelie went anyway. She waited in the outer room, in the darkness, until Isolde left. Then she counted to 100 and went in. He never asked why she came. He just held out his hand, and she took it. The ritual continued, but there was tension now. Something unspoken pulsing between them like a second heartbeat. Dorian held her tighter, for longer, and Amelie found herself wishing these moments would never end, that dawn would never come. Dangerous. All of that was dangerous. On the morning of the 4th day, Tilda found her in the gardens. Amelie had left early, before sunrise, needing air, distance, anything but the walls that seemed to be closing in. "You're playing with fire, girl," Tilda said without preamble, sitting beside her on the stone bench. The older woman held a basket of fresh herbs, probably from the greenhouse. And fire burns. It always burns. "I don't know what you're talking about," Amelie muttered, watching the mist slowly dissipate over the gardens. Liar. But there was affection in the word. Tilda sighed, setting the basket aside. "Amelie, look at me." Amelie obeyed. Tilda's eyes were kind, concerned. "I've seen many things in this castle. Good, bad, horrible." Tilda took her hand. "And I can see when two people are drowning together. You two, it's like watching someone walk off a cliff with their eyes wide open." "He's going to marry her," the words came out harshly. "I know that. I'm not a fool." "No, you're not foolish. You're worse." Tilda squeezed her hand. "You're hopeful. And hope without possibility is just another word for pain." Amelie closed her eyes. She knew Tilda was right. She always was. But knowing it didn't change what she felt. It didn't change the fact that every time she touched Dorian, every time she felt his pain ease beneath her hands, something inside her whispered, "My." "What do I do?" she asked, hating how small she sounded, lost. "You protect yourself," Tilda said simply, "before it's too late." But it was too late. Amelie had known it the moment the words were spoken. Weeks too late. Maybe months. Maybe from the moment he had held her hand at first night, and she had felt not just pain, but connection. "I can't," she admitted, so quietly it was barely audible. Tilda said nothing. She just pulled her into a hug, and Amelie allowed herself, for a moment, to be weak, to be human, to be scared. "Then prepare for the fall, dear," Tilda murmured against her hair, "and I hope someone is there to catch you." Amelie didn't see Dorian all day. He was in council meetings. Afterward, there was a formal dinner with Isolde and the northern nobles. Amelie wasn't summoned. She wasn't needed. She tried not to think about it as she worked, tried not to picture Isolde beside him at the table, tried not to picture her hand on his arm, tried not to feel that terrible need to be there, to make sure he was okay. It was failing miserably. When night fell, Amelie went to her quarters, as she should. She lay down. She tried to sleep. She couldn't. Restlessness consumed her like a fever. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Not her ability, something deeper. Instinct. Midnight passed. 1 in the morning, 2. Then he heard. Not a physical sound, but a pulsation, as if someone had screamed his name directly into his mind. Pain, pure and absolute. Amelie was out of bed before she could consciously process it. She grabbed a shawl and ran through the dark corridors, up the stairs. The guards recognized her now. They didn't stop her. They let her pass. The door to the royal chambers was unlocked. Amelie entered. Chaos greeted her. Furniture was overturned. Broken glass was scattered across the floor. The window. He had broken the window. And in the center of it all, Dorian, on his knees, hands clutching his hair, body shaking so violently he seemed to be convulsing. But worse, much worse, were his eyes. Reds. Not golden. Red like embers, like blood, like death. Red fury. No, the whisper escaped Amelie. This couldn't be happening. Not yet. He was too young. He had time. They had time. Dorian lifted his head at the sound of her voice. He focused on her, but there was no recognition in that look, only hunger, anger, violence waiting to be unleashed. He growled. The sound wasn't human. It was something primordial, bestial. And when he rose, his movements were erratic, too fluid, too fast, pure predator. Amelie should have run. Every rational fiber in her being screamed to flee, but her feet wouldn't move. Because beneath that fury, beneath that violence, she could still feel him, Dorian, trapped, fighting, dying. "Dorian," she said, keeping her voice steady despite her terror. "It's me, Amelie." He took a step toward her, another. She could see the claws. When had that happened? His hands were claws now, black and sharp, lethal. "You're fighting," she continued, not moving, letting him get closer. He was so close now. He could touch her, kill her. She could feel the heat emanating from him, the raw strength vibrating in the air. "Please," his voice broke. "Please come back. I need you. I need you to come back to me." Dorian stopped. The red eyes blinked, once, twice, and for a moment, just a breath, she saw gold, saw him. Amelie held out her hand, slowly, as if offering it to a wild animal. "Take my hand," she whispered, "like every night. Just take my hand." He looked at her hand, at those claws that replaced her fingers. Something passed over his face. Horror, awareness, pain. And then he recoiled, violently, as if she had been burned. "No." The word came out distorted, half snarl, half human. "Run." "I'm not going to run." "Run!" "No!" Amelie took a step toward him. "I won't leave you. Not like this. Not... never." "You don't understand." Dorian fell to his knees again, his clawed hands digging into his own chest. Blood gushed. He was hurting himself, trying to maintain control through the pain. "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to destroy." "Then destroy me." The words came out before he could stop them. Madness, pure madness, but not without a fight first. "Give me a chance. Give us both a chance." She knelt before him, ignoring the glass cutting her knees, ignoring the danger, ignoring everything except he. She placed her hands over his bloody claws, over his pain. The contact was like touching lightning. Amelie screamed, not from physical pain, from overload. It was too much pain, too much fury, too much violence. She was drowning in it, being dragged under, consumed. But she didn't let go. He closed his eyes, he breathed, and pushed. Not gently this time, not like calming a frightened animal, but like stemming a tidal wave, like bracing herself against a hurricane. Every ounce of strength, every bit of skill, she threw against that fury. "You won't have it," she thought fiercely. "Won't take it from me." Images flooded his mind, memories that weren't his own. A boy watching his father rip out a servant's throat, a mother crying in the corner, blood on the walls, screams. "Monster," someone whispered. "You will become a monster like him." Fear. So much fear. Fear of becoming that. Fear of getting hurt. Fear of losing control. Fear of being alone. "You are not alone," Amelie projected with all her strength. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The tremor subsided, gradually, like a storm losing strength. Amelie opened her eyes. Golden. His eyes were golden again, human, filled with tears. "Emily," his voice was hoarse, broken. "What did you do?" "Something very stupid." She let out a laugh that came out as a sob. "Or very right. I haven't decided yet." Dorian looked at his hands. The claws had receded, human fingers again, though they still trembled. He turned them over, studied them as if he had never seen them before. "How?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. She was exhausted. Every muscle ached. She could feel blood trickling from her knees where the glass had cut her. But she was alive, and he was alive. And for now, that was enough. Dorian finally looked at her, really looked, and what she saw in those eyes made her forget how to breathe. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just need. It was something bigger, deeper, more terrifying. "You completed the bond," he whispered, "completely. When you should have run, you—" His hand came up, touched her face, reverent, incredulous. "You stayed. I will always stay." The words came out as a promise, as a vow. Dorian closed his eyes. A tear fell. "Don't say that. Not when you don't know what it means. So tell me." He opened his eyes. He held her face in his hands like something precious, fragile. "It means that, if anything happens to you, I die with you." His voice was filled with pain, with fear. "It means that now we are bound, soul to soul, until the end. And my end," he looked around, at the destruction, at the blood, "my end is violence, always will be." "Then we'll change the ending." Emily covered his hands with hers. "Together, together," she repeated firmly. For a long moment, they just existed like this, kneeling in broken glass and blood, holding each other as if they were the only real thing in the world. Then, the door opened. Isolde. And behind her, guards, dozens of them. She looked at the scene, the chaos, the blood, Dorian holding Emily as if she were oxygen, and smiled. There was no victory in that smile. There was triumph. "Guards," she said, sweetly, deadly, "arrest her." "What?" Emily staggered to her feet. Dorica stood with her, stepping in front. "She didn't do anything," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "No?" Isolde tilted her head, feigning confusion. "My love, everyone in the hallway heard your screams, saw the destruction, and now I find you covered in blood, and this servant in your chambers, alone." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Clearly, she used her powers on you, manipulated you, probably planned to murder you and blame the Fury." "That's a lie," Emily protested. "It's the truth." Isolde turned to the guards. "And I have witnesses, nobles who saw her enter here night after night, who saw her touch the king in inappropriate ways." Her smile widened. "Silent Omegas are dangerous. We all know that. And this one clearly used her powers to seduce and control, to attempt murder." "No one will believe this," Dorian said. But Emily could hear the doubt in his voice, could feel the fear. "No?" Isolde walked in a circle around them. "Are you willing to risk it?" In a public trial, where she would have to admit what she is? Where you would have to admit that you allowed, no, summoned, a silent Omega to your quarters every night? She paused, staring at Dorian. Or she goes peacefully, and I guarantee she'll be treated humanely, in a comfortable cell, until all this is forgotten. It was blackmail, blatant, clear, and horrible. "Dorian," Emily grabbed his arm. "No, don't agree to this." But she could see the war in his eyes. She could sense the impossibility of the situation. If he fought, Isolde would go public. Emily would be tried, convicted. If he agreed, at least she would live. Live in a cell, a voice whispered, but alive. How long? Dorian asked, each word seeming to cost blood. Until after the wedding, Isolde said. 2 weeks. Then I'll release you. You have my word. Lie, Emily thought. She's lying. But Dorian believed, or wanted to believe, because the alternative was... Okay, he said, and Emily felt as if the ground had fallen away. But if she's hurt, if even a hair on her head is touched, she will be treated as a guest, Isolde promised. Just a guest who can't leave. The guards approached. Emily didn't struggle as they grabbed her arms. She didn't scream. She just stared at Dorian. You're going to marry her. It wasn't a question. It was understanding. Surrender. I have no choice. His voice was dead. There's always a choice, Emily said. Then, more quietly, but I understand. I've always understood. They took her, and the last thing Emily saw before they turned the corner was Dorian, on his knees again, not in fury this time, of defeat. The cell wasn't as bad as I expected. Small, dark, but clean. There was a narrow bed, a window too high to reach, and silence. So much silence. Emily sat on the bed, hugging her knees. She felt his absence like a physical pain. The bond pulled. She screamed. It hurt. 2 weeks, he thought. And then what? Will she set me free? Or is that a lie, too? It didn't matter, because in 2 weeks, Dorian would be married, Isolde would be queen, and Emily would be forgotten, as has always been the fate of people like her. 6 days. Emily counted each one by marking small lines on the stone wall with a piece of metal loose from the bed frame. 6 lines. 6 days without seeing the sun properly, without feeling fresh air, without Emily. The bond tugged constantly, like rope wrapped around her ribs, tightening with every breath. She could feel Dorian on the other side, distant but present. Pain, so much pain, and something darker, resignation, as if he'd given up. Don't give up, she thought every night, lying in that narrow bed. Please don't give up on us. But maybe it was already too late for us. Maybe there never really was an us. Just 2 broken hearts holding each other in the darkness, pretending that would be enough. On the morning of the 7th day, Tilda appeared. The door opened and there she was, carrying the tray of food, fresh bread, cheese, fruit. Far more than the simple portions Emily had received so far. But more important than the food were Tilda's eyes, worried, frightened. Tilda! Emily got out of bed too quickly, dizziness making her stagger. A week of barely any movement had taken its toll. What are you doing here? If Isolde finds out? Isolde is busy planning her own wedding. Tilda entered, closing the door behind her. She placed the tray on the small table. She turned, studied Emily. You look terrible. Thank you. Very comforting. This is no time for sarcasm, girl. But there was a smile on Tilda's lips. It quickly disappeared. We don't have much time. Eat while I talk. Emily obeyed, sitting down and taking the bread. It was warm, fresh from the oven. Her stomach growled embarrassingly. He's not well, Tilda said bluntly. Dorian. Ever since you were arrested, She paused, searching for words. It's like watching someone waste away. He does his duties, he attends meetings, he smiles at Isolde when necessary, but it's all mechanical, like a wind-up doll. Emily closed her eyes, the bread suddenly like ash in her mouth. She could feel it. Of course she could. The bond wouldn't let her ignore it. And worse, Tilda continued, her voice lowering, the episodes are back. Every night. Gareth has to stay with him, physically restrain him so he doesn't hurt himself. Yesterday, Dorian nearly ripped out his own throat trying to stop the transformation. Horror ran cold through Amelie's blood. No! Yes. Tilda knelt before her, took her hands in hers. And Isolde knows. She knows he's getting worse. She knows that without you, he'll completely succumb. Her eyes narrowed, and she is satisfied, therefore. Why? But even as she asked, Emily knew. Of course, obvious. She wants him dead. Don't die, corrected. Lose control. Go into a permanent rage. Because then the council will have to remove you, and guess who takes over as regent until a new king is chosen? The queen. The words came out in a horrified whisper. Isolde. Exactly. Tilda squeezed her hands. She planned this from the start. Find out about you, use you to temporarily stabilize him while she consolidated her position, then remove you, let him crumble, and claim the throne over his ruins. Anger, pure and incandescent. Amelie hadn't felt anger like this in years. Not since she was captured, not since she learned that anger only brought punishment. But this was different. It wasn't anger for herself. It was anger for he. I need to get out of here, she said, already standing up. I need to— Wait. Tilda pulled her back. There's more. Gareth discovered something. Ancient documents in the library about the Ashmar bloodline, about the Fury. Amelie stopped, focused. What? It's a curse. Real, magical. Tilda pulled something from inside her shawl, folded pages covered in cramped writing. Placed generations ago by Omegas who were enslaved by the royal family. A revenge. Every alpha king of the Ashmar line is cursed to lose control before the age of 30, to become a monster as those who enslaved them became monsters. Amelie's hands trembled as she held the pages. She read quickly, her eyes flying over the words. Stories of kings past, all succumbing, all dying young, violently, alone. But there is a way out. Tilda pointed to a specific paragraph. The curse can be broken, but the price, she hesitated. The king must free all the Omegas in the kingdom, all of them, not just in his domains, but enforce this law in all allied territories. And he must renounce the Lunar Pact. Resign? Amelie looked at her. That means abdicate, lose the throne. Tilda nodded gravely. The Lunar Pact is what gives the ruler legitimacy. Without it, he is just a man, powerless, positionless, nothing. Amelie read and reread the paragraph, searching for an alternative, a loophole. There was none. It was either this or death, freedom for all or loss for one. He would never accept, she murmured. The kingdom would be thrown into chaos. Isolde would take over anyway. And he— her voice broke. He would be left with nothing. No, nothing, Tilda said softly. He would have you, if you want. You, as if she were enough. As if love were enough to make up for a lost kingdom? But maybe it was. Maybe for Dorian, finally, it was. How do I get out of here? Emily asked, her decision solidifying. Tilda smiled. Small, sly. I thought you'd never ask. The escape was surprisingly simple. Tilda had bribed the guard, a man named Marcus, who owed her favors since Tilda had cared for his sick mother years ago. He looked away as Emily passed, wrapped in Tilda's shawl, head bowed. The corridors were quiet. It was late. Most of the servants had already retired. Amelie moved like a shadow, memory guiding her steps. She knew this castle. Every corridor, every staircase. 6 years left their mark. He reached the royal chambers. The door was ajar. Dim light leaked through the crack. Amelie pushed her slowly. Dorian was at the window. Of course, always the window. But this time, he wasn't just staring. He was falling apart. leaning against the frame, his body hunched, his breathing uneven. Even from his back, she could see the tremors. She could feel the fury growling just beneath the surface. Dorian! His name came out like a prayer. He froze. He didn't turn around. For a long moment, he didn't move or speak. Then, "You shouldn't be here." His voice was hoarse, broken. "It's dangerous." "It's always been dangerous." Emily walked in, closing the door. "It's never stopped me before." "You should." Finally, he turned around. And Emily had to bite her lip to keep from gasping. He looked worse than she'd imagined. Too thin, dark circles under his eyes, like wounds. And his eyes, when they met hers, were almost empty, as if the color were bleeding out. "Emily, you need to go." He backed away, keeping his distance. "I'm losing. The fury is winning. In days, maybe hours, there will be nothing of me left, only the monster." "Then we break the curse." He blinked. "What?" "The curse. We figured out how to break it." Emily pulled out the pages Tilda had given her and held them out. "It's all here. How to free you, how to free us." Dorian picked up the pages with trembling hands. He read. She watched as understanding, then hope, then despair cross his face. "No." He handed the papers back as if they were burning. "I won't do that." "Why?" "Because I know what it means. Freeing all the Omegas means war. The nobility will never accept it. Half of them profit from slavery. And renouncing the pact?" He ran his hands through his hair. "The kingdom would collapse. There would be a power struggle. People would die. Thousands. And if you don't, you die." Emily grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. "And then Isolde takes over. Do you think she'll rule better? Do you think she cares about anyone but herself?" "It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what's right." "Right?" Emily almost laughed, bitterly. "What's right is for you to martyr yourself? Turn into a monster while that woman steals everything you've built? It's about you staying alive," he shouted, and the sound echoed. "It's about you having a chance to be free, to have a life, even if it's without me." Silence fell. Heavy. Suffocating. Emily stared at him. This man, this king, this foolish, noble, impossible man who was willing to die so that she could live. "Do you really think I would want that?" she asked, her voice low, dangerous. "Life without you?" "You would get over it." "No." "So simple, so true. I wouldn't get over it, because you completed the bond, remember? Soul to soul. If you die," the words trailed off, "I die with you. Not physically. Worse, I die inside. I become a shell, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I let you give up." Dorian closed his eyes. A tear fell. "It's not fair to put this on me." "Nothing about us is fair." Emily cupped his face, her thumb wiping away the tear. "But it's real, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. I'm tired of being invisible, of being disposable, of letting other people decide my worth." She leaned in closer, their foreheads touching. "You made me feel seen, real, important, and now I'm telling you, you matter to me. More than kingdoms, more than thrones, more than any damn thing in this world." "Emily." His voice was broken, but his hands came up, gripping her waist, pulling her closer. "If we do this, we lose everything." "Not everything," she smiled, small, fragile. "We would have each other. And if that's not everything, then I don't know what is." For a long moment, they just existed like that. Holding, breathing, choosing. Then Dorian kissed her. Not gentle, not chaste. Desperate, like a drowning man finally finding air. Emily responded with equal ferocity, hands buried in his hair, her body pressed against his. Everything that had been pent up, weeks of need, of desire, of unspoken love, poured out in that kiss. When they broke apart, they were both panting. "Okay," Dorian whispered against her lips. "Okay, let's do this." "Together, together," Amelie confirmed. And for the first time in days, he felt hope. The blow came faster than they expected. When Isolde discovered that Amelie had escaped, when she learned that Dorian was planning to free the Omegas and abdicate, she acted. Swiftly. Brutally. He called the council together. He presented evidence of Dorian's instability. Witnesses who swore they saw him go into rage, forged documents showing erratic orders, and demanded that he be removed immediately before the kingdom descended into chaos. The council meeting was a farce. Amelie was there, insisted on being there, next to Dorian. Gareth stood behind them. Tilda stood in the back, watching with sharp eyes. "You are ill, your majesty," Lord Heron, a fat man with more ambition than loyalty, declared. "Clearly unstable. For the good of the kingdom, you must step aside voluntarily." "Unstable," Dorian repeated calmly, very calmly. "Interesting that my stability is only being questioned now, after years of ruling, after Lady Isolde so conveniently presents all this evidence." Murmurs, glances exchanged. Some council members looked uncomfortable, but not enough to speak. "Your Majesty," Isolde stepped forward. "Perfect. Composed. No one is questioning your character, only your health. We all know about the curse, about the rage. It's hereditary, inevitable." She feigned sympathy. "Let me help. Let me rule while you rest, recover." "Get well soon," Dorian smiled humorously. "Do you really think anyone here believes that? That if I walk away, you'll let me back in?" "My love, don't call me that." For the first time, true anger crossed his face. "Don't ever call me that. You don't know what that word means." Isolde paled, but quickly recovered. "Gods, he's clearly upset. Arrest him, for his own protection." The guards moved, but Gareth stepped in front of Dorian, sword drawn. "None of you touch him. I've been protecting him for 10 years. I won't stop now." Tensions flared. More guards entered. Swords were drawn. Amelie felt panic rising. This was going to turn into a bloodbath. People were going to die. "Stop!" Dorian's voice thundered. Pure alpha power. Everyone froze. He took a deep breath. He looked around the room, at the cowardly advisors, at the triumphant Isolde, at the loyal Gareth, at the terrified Amelie. And then he made the choice. "There will be no prison," he said. "No fighting. No blood." He walked to the center of the room. He removed the chain from around his neck, the symbol of the Lunar Pact. He held it for a moment. Then he placed it on the table. "I resign. Voluntarily. I renounce all titles, all power." He looked at Isolde. "You want the throne? Take it. But without blood on your hands. At least that part." Shock. Absolute. Even Isolde looked stunned. "But," Lord Heron began. "And my last order as king," Dorian continued, his voice rising, "is that all Omegas in my domain be released, immediately, unconditionally. Anyone who disobeys is guilty of treason." Chaos. Screams. Protests. But Dorian didn't wait. He took Emily's hand. "Let's go," he said simply. And they went. Emily didn't know what to expect when they left the castle. Imprisonment? Persecution? Death? But nothing happened. Isolde got what she wanted. The throne. No struggle. No martyrdom. Why risk turning Dorian into a symbol? She let him go, because a man without power was no threat. I was wrong, but I wouldn't find that out for months. Gareth went with them. Tilda, too. They refused to stay. Too old to start obeying tyrants now, she grumbled. They traveled south, to small villages far from the castle, places where king was just a word, when no one cared about bloodlines or curses. And slowly, so slowly, Dorian began to heal. The episodes lessened. Then they stopped. The curse, broken by the sacrifice, finally released him. The nights were still difficult. Memories didn't fade easily. But Amelie was there, always there, holding his hand in the darkness. And he held hers back. Months later, in a small village near the border, Dorian woke before dawn. Emily lay beside him, her hair fanned out on the pillow, her breathing soft and even. He watched her for a long moment. This woman, this Omega, this person that he had chosen over safety, over logic, over everything. And for the first time in his life, Dorian didn't feel the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. He felt free. "You're watching me," Emily murmured without opening her eyes. "It's creepy." He laughed, soft, real. "Sorry. Liar." But she smiled, her eyes finally opening, meeting his. "Didn't you sleep?" "I slept. Well, no nightmares." "No nightmares," she repeated, as if testing the words. Then she smiled wider. "That's good. That's really good." "Yeah." He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Thanks to you." "No." Emily cupped his face. "Thanks to us. Together, remember?" "Together," he agreed. And as the sun began to rise, painting the sky gold and pink, they simply existed. Two broken hearts that had healed together. Two wounded spirits that had found peace. Not in kingdoms or thrones, not in power or position, but in choice. In the simple, impossible, courageous choice of Amar. And choose every day to continue loving. Even when the world said it was madness. Especially then. Years later, stories reached their ears. Isolde had ruled poorly, greedy, cruel. The kingdom bled under her leadership. Revolts broke out. Freed Omegas formed communities. They began to fight back. And when he finally fell, deposed by those he had oppressed, no one wept. A new council has taken over, one made up of alphas, betas, and omegas, egalitarian. Imperfect, but trying. They sent messengers. They asked Dorian to return, not as king, but as an advisor, as a symbol of change. He considered. He consulted Emily. "It's your choice," she said, "but know that wherever you go, I go." "Always together?" "Always," he agreed. And as the sun began to rise, painting the sky gold and pink, they simply existed. Two broken hearts that had healed together. Two wounded spirits that had found peace. Not in kingdoms or thrones, not in power or position, but in choice. In the simple, impossible, courageous choice of Amar. And choose every day to continue loving, even when the world said it was madness. Especially then. Years later, stories reached their ears. Isolde had ruled poorly. Greedy, cruel. The kingdom bled under her leadership. Revolts broke out. Freed Omegas formed communities. They began to fight back. And when he finally fell, deposed by those he had oppressed, no one wept. A new council has taken over, one made up of alphas, betas, and omegas, egalitarian. Imperfect, but trying. They sent messengers. They asked Dorian to return, not as king, but as an advisor, as a symbol of change. He considered. He consulted Emily. "It's your choice," she said, "but know that wherever you go, I go." "Always together?" "Always," he agreed. And as the sun began to rise, painting the sky gold and pink, they simply existed. Two broken hearts that had healed together. Two wounded spirits that had found peace. Not in kingdoms or thrones, not in power or position, but in choice. In the simple, impossible, courageous choice of Amar. And choose every day to continue loving, even when the world said it was madness. especially then. Years later, stories reached their ears. Isolde had ruled poorly, greedy, cruel. The kingdom bled under her leadership. Revolts broke out. Freed Omegas formed communities. They began to fight back. And when he finally fell, deposed by those he had oppressed, no one wept. A new council has taken over, one made up of alphas, betas, and omegas, egalitarian, imperfect, but trying. They sent messengers. They asked Dorian to return, not as king, but as an advisor, as a symbol of change. He considered. He consulted Amelie. "It's your choice," she said, "but know that wherever you go, I go. Always together? Always." They returned, not to the castle, but to villages, to people, to rebuild what had been broken, together. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when Dorian held Amelie and listened to her soft breathing, he thought of all he had lost, and everything he had gained. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would do it all again. Every time, without hesitation. Because she was worth more than kingdoms. It would always be worth it. And so ends the story of Amelie and Dorian. Two souls broken by the world, but who found healing in each other. She, an omega forced to crawl. He, a king cursed to lose everything. Together, they chose love over power, freedom over chains. And they proved that sometimes losing a kingdom means gaining something infinitely more valuable, a heart that beats in sync with yours. But what about you? What did you think of this journey? Did Amelie inspire you? Did Dorian move you? Did Isolde irritate you as much as she irritated me? Tell us in the comments what your favorite part was. Was it the ball, the first touch, the escape from the cell, or that ending where they chose to rebuild together? If you've made it this far, please leave a like. This shows me that stories like this are worth telling. Share with someone who loves intense, dark, and twisty romances. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because every week I bring new universes, new impossible couples, and new exciting journeys. See you in the next story. And remember, true love isn't finding someone perfect, it's choosing someone imperfect and deciding every day that it's worth fighting for.